A woman's scream sliced through the courtroom like glass. Blood bloomed across her ivory blouse, stark and wet. Chairs toppled. A gavel hit the floor. "She was never supposed to know!" Someone bellowed as officers surged forward. In the chaos, a child's drawing slipped from a man's folder, crimson crayon smeared across stick figures holding hands. The judge stood frozen, gaping. A man in a dark coat, face bruised and left eye twitching, dropped a burned letter onto the floor. Flames had kissed its edges. The name, Clara, still legible. Somewhere behind it all, a muted heartbeat pulsed, slow and heavy. Glass crunched beneath polished shoes as a younger woman stared into the lens of a courtroom security camera. Tears didn't fall. Her lips barely moved. "He watched her die," she whispered. No one moved. No one breathed. The walls didn't echo. They absorbed everything. The silence screamed louder than the blood. And in that frozen moment, something inside the girl shattered beyond repair. Outside the courthouse, rain carved rivers down the brick facade, as Clara stood motionless. Her white blouse clung to her skin, stained and soaked. The world around her was a blur of flashing red and blue. Sirens screamed. But inside her, everything was silent. Reporters surged like sharks, voices jabbing questions through the rain, but Clara heard nothing. Her mind replayed the moment the letter slipped from his hand. Her father's hand. The man who raised her, who was now accused of orchestrating the death of her real mother. A storm cracked the sky open. Lightning revealed the haunted hollowness in Clara's eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. Her fists were clenched so tight, blood dripped from her palms. The truth had been unearthed like a buried corpse, and it smelled just as rotten. One officer moved to guide her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. She jerked away, whispering to no one, "He lied my whole life." The rain didn't wash it away. Inside a dimly lit police station, Clara sat in silence. Her hands trembled on the table, blood smeared across her knuckles from clenched fists. Across from her, Detective Myers flipped open a folder. Photos spilled out, crime scene images. A body. A necklace. A letter fragment. Clara stared at them like they belonged to another world. "You were never supposed to see that," Myers said softly. Clara met his gaze with a calm fury. "He watched her die, didn't he?" she asked. Myers didn't answer. Instead, he slid over the final photo. It showed Clara's mother on the ground, her hand curled around a half-burned letter, matching the one dropped in court. The room fell into a vacuum of silence. A flickering fluorescent bulb overhead cast sickly shadows. Clara didn't scream. She reached forward, brushing her fingers over the photo, her voice low. "I'll never forgive him." Back at home, Clara wandered into her childhood bedroom. It hadn't changed. Pink wallpaper. Stuffed animals. A music box on the dresser. She moved like a ghost, trailing fingers along dusty shelves. Her eyes settled on a framed photo. Her as a girl, smiling next to the man she now saw as a stranger. Her voice trembled. Was it always a lie? She opened the music box. The lullaby played, eerie in its sweetness. As the ballerina spun, Clara noticed something behind the lining, a small folded note. She unfolded it with trembling hands. It was her mother's handwriting. "One day, the truth will come. Don't hate him too much." Her knees gave way, and she sank to the floor, clutching the note to her chest. A storm raged outside, but inside Clara's room, it was still. Grief had settled like fog. That night, Clara stood barefoot in the backyard, the burned letter in one hand, the note from her mother in the other. The grass was wet. Her nightgown clung to her skin. She looked up at the sky, clouds swirling like ink. One match struck, hissed, and caught fire. Slowly, she held the letter to it. Flames danced up the edge, swallowing every lie she had believed. The note from her mother trembled in her free hand, untouched. "I won't hate him," she whispered. "But I will never love him again. The fire crackled as the letter turned to ash, drifting into the night air like black snow. Clara watched, unblinking, until the final ember died. The silence afterward was different, no longer screaming. Just final. She turned back toward the house. Each step felt heavier. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant surviving. Clara returned to the hospital where her mother had once stayed, now an abandoned shell. Rust-streaked walls, shattered windows, and forgotten files scattered like leaves. Her boots echoed through empty halls. The place smelled of mildew and old sorrow. In room 302, the bed still faced the window. Clara sat on the edge, eyes fixed on the peeling paint and faded wallpaper. "You died here," she whispered. Her fingers brushed across the nightstand, finding an old patient band with her mother's name. The weight of memory wrapped around her chest like a vice. She could almost hear her mother's soft hums in the air. In that decaying silence, Clara felt time collapse. The truth wasn't just in the courtroom or a letter. It was here, embedded in these walls. "I should have asked more questions," she murmured. But she was a child then, and children only see what they're shown. In the quiet of her apartment, Clara opened her mother's old journal. Its cover was cracked, the pages yellowed with age. Each word was like a whisper from the past. Her mother had written about fear, about love, about the man Clara called father. But between the lines were warnings missed by a child's eyes. "He watches even when he smiles," one entry read. Clara traced the ink with trembling fingers. Her mother had known. She'd tried to protect her, silently, with words instead of weapons. As she read deeper, Clara found a photograph tucked between the pages, her mother and a man who wasn't her father, laughing in sunlight. Her breath caught. "You loved someone else," she said softly. The betrayal twisted again, but now with confusion. Who was the real villain? And who had been forced into silence? Clara visited her aunt's house, the one who always said too little. Over tea, they sat in silence until Clara pulled the photograph from her pocket and laid it on the table. Her aunt's face paled. "You knew," Clara said. The older woman, early 60s, silver-haired, didn't deny it. Instead, she reached for a drawer and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "Your mother made me promise," she said. Inside was a second letter, written on the same stationery as the burned one. Clara unfolded it, heart racing. Her mother had planned to leave, to take Clara and run. But something stopped her. Fear. Control. Do. Maybe love. "He found the letter before she could go," the aunt said, voice cracking. Clara clutched the paper, bile rising in her throat. "She died trying to save me," she whispered. And no one had stopped it. Later that evening, Clara wandered into a church she hadn't entered since childhood. Candles flickered in glass holders, casting long shadows across wooden pews. She sat in the third row, clutching the second letter. Her lips didn't move, but her mind screamed prayers. Why did no one help her? Her body hunched forward, arms hugging herself as the organ's distant drone filled the silence. A priest walked past but didn't speak. He knew grief when he saw it. Clara stood and approached the altar, placing the letter beside a worn crucifix. "She mattered," she said. Her voice echoed gently through the empty nave. Her hand lingered over the letter as tears finally came, not the kind that sought comfort, but the kind that signaled surrender. Letting go didn't look like peace. It looked like pain fully felt. Clara stood by the ocean, dusk bleeding into night. The second letter, clutched in her hand, trembled with the breeze. Waves roared like restless spirits. She looked down at the words one last time, her mother's last message not meant to be read but found. Then with steady fingers, Clara tore the paper in half. And again. And again. Now. Until it was confetti in her fists. "I release you," she said to the wind. One piece floated up, catching the last sliver of sunlight. She didn't need the letter anymore. Its weight was inside her now, burned into her blood. She stepped into the tide, cold water licking her ankles. Behind her, footsteps faded. She didn't turn back. The sea took her shreds of memory and didn't ask questions. Letting go, finally, wasn't forgetting. It was no longer needing to hold it at all. Clara stood in the courthouse hallway again, staring at the polished floors like they could erase what had happened. This time, she wasn't alone. A woman approached, middle-aged, sharp eyes, confident posture. "You're Clara?" she asked. Clara nodded. "I'm your mother's sister," the woman said. Not the one who stayed silent. The tension between them hung thick. Clara's breath caught. "You were alive all this time?" "He kept us apart," her aunt replied, handing her a sealed envelope. "Your mother left this with me before she died." Clara hesitated, then took it. "Why now?" "Because the lie's unraveling," the woman said. Clara turned toward the courtroom doors. The past was clawing its way forward, and it wasn't finished. Every answer gave birth to more questions. And the truth, it seemed, had more witnesses than she ever knew. Clara sat in a public library, the envelope from her aunt unopened in front of her. Rows of silent shelves surrounded her, an odd sanctuary for breaking truths. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Inside was a birth certificate. Not hers. Her mother's. With a different surname. "Miriam Gold," Clara whispered. Her hands found a second document. A legal petition, one that was denied. Her mother had tried to reclaim her identity, but was blocked. Clara's father had forged records. Controlled everything. "He erased her," she whispered. Around her, the room remained quiet, unaware. A third paper emerged. A photo of a house, circled in red ink, with 2 words scrawled beneath. "Safe once." Clara knew where she had to go next. Letting go wasn't just emotional. It was forensic. She had to trace every missing piece. The house in the photo was real. Nestled at the edge of a forgotten town, it stood dilapidated but intact. Clara walked up the cracked path. Grass knee-high, air still. The door creaked as she pushed it open. Dust swirled like ghosts. Inside, the living room looked paused in time. Faded wallpaper, a toppled photo frame, broken piano keys. Her mother had lived here once. Clara stepped over shattered glass, her breath catching when she saw a child's height chart carved into a doorframe. Her name was etched there. "She brought me here," she whispered. A memory surged, her mother singing softly, holding her close. Clara clutched the frame. In that silence she realized the horror wasn't just death, it was the erasure of memory. Her father hadn't only killed her mother. He'd tried to destroy her history. Clara drove back toward the city, her hands white-knuckled on the wheel. The envelope sat beside her, a silent passenger. At a red light her phone buzzed. Detective Myers. "We've got something," he said. "Security footage from the night your mother died." Clara's chest tightened. "Send it." Minutes later, she pulled over and watched. Grainy video. A shadowy figure entered the hospital room. Not a nurse, not a doctor. Her father. He stood beside her mother for 7 minutes. No alarms. No movement. Then, he left. And her mother never woke again. Clara pressed pause. The frame froze on his face, expression calm, almost loving. "He didn't even flinch," she whispered. Her father had been pretending for decades. A man of kindness, community, reputation. All built over her mother's grave. Clara entered her father's study with shaking hands. The key she'd stolen weeks ago clicked the lock open. Shelves of books lined the walls, too neat, too intentional. She began pulling volumes down. Behind a false wall she found a box. Inside, photos, hospital records, letters her mother had written but never mailed. All addressed to Clara. Her breath caught. Dozens of them. One per birthday. One after each school event. She never stopped writing, Clara whispered. He had kept them. Hidden them. Proof of his cruelty wrapped in silence. At the bottom, a videotape. Labeled only, for the truth. Clara clutched it, eyes burning. It wasn't just about loss anymore. It was about theft, a lifetime stolen. And now she would reclaim it, frame by frame. The tape slid into the old VCR with a mechanical groan. Clara sat cross-legged on the floor of her apartment, alone except for the hum of the TV. The screen flickered to life, static dissolving into a grainy home video. Her mother appeared, young, vibrant, laughing as she pushed a toddler Clara on a swing. But then the footage shifted. A hidden camera angle. Her mother speaking in whispers to the lens. "If you're seeing this, something's gone wrong. He's not who you think." Clara leaned in, breath caught in her throat. "He listens. He watches. I tried to leave. I tried." The video cut to black for a beat, then returned with bruises on her mother's arms. "Don't trust him, Clara, no matter what he says." The footage ended. Clara sat frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. The truth wasn't just confirmed, it was documented. Clara stormed into Detective Meyer's office with the tape in her hand like a weapon. He looked up, startled by her fury. "Play it," she demanded. As the footage rolled, Meyer's jaw tightened. When it ended, he didn't speak immediately. Finally, he said, "This changes everything." Clara's voice shook. "He lied to everyone. Judges, social workers, me too." Myers nodded solemnly. "But we need corroboration. This isn't enough for court. It's old, unverified." Rage burned behind Clara's eyes. "How much more do you need?" Her corpse. A live confession. She slammed the letters onto his desk. "She wrote me every year. He stole them." Myers sighed. "We'll get him, but it has to stick." Clara stepped back, gathering her breath. "Then I'll make sure it does." The war wasn't over, it was finally beginning. That night, Clara broke into her father's law office. Not to vandalize, but to uncover. She knew the man was careful, but secrets had weight, and they always left footprints. In the back filing room she found it, an unmarked folder hidden behind tax records. Inside were settlement papers. Anyway, when did she be trained? Medical falsifications. Paid silence. A name stood out, the nurse who attended her mother's final hours. Clara took a photo of the document. Her hands were shaking again. "You paid them to lie," she whispered. Behind her, the building creaked. She stuffed the folder into her coat and slipped out the back door, heart pounding. The narrative had changed again. Her father hadn't just erased the past. He built an empire on it. At dawn, Clara sat across from the nurse. Retired, mid-70s, hands shaking over a teacup. The woman wouldn't meet her eyes. "I was young." He offered more than I'd ever seen. Clara slid the tape across the table. "You knew she was dying." The nurse's lips quivered. "She begged me not to leave. I did anyway." Clara's silence was heavier than words. "I've lived with it," the nurse added. "Every day." "Then do one right thing," Clara said. "Testify." The nurse looked up, eyes brimming. "Hell ruined me." Clara didn't blink. He already did. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the nurse reached out, her hand resting on Clara's. "I'll do it," she said. "For her. And for you." Clara exhaled. Letting go didn't mean releasing rage. It meant using it. Clara stood before a wall of press microphones, the courthouse behind her. Her father had been arrested hours earlier. She wore black, not for mourning, but for war. "My name is Clara Gold," she said clearly. "Not the name he gave me." Crowd hushed. "For 20 years I lived under a lie. Today that lie ends." Flashbulbs exploded. She raised a letter, one of the stolen ones. "This was meant for me." He kept it, like he kept everything. Her voice didn't tremble. "He silenced my mother. But she still spoke through these pages. And now, she speaks through me." She stepped back from the podium, letting the silence ring louder than applause. Clara wasn't just a survivor. She was a witness. A sword made of paper and truth. The courtroom buzzed with tension, the kind that coiled around your ribs. Clara sat behind the prosecution table, flanked by her attorney and the nurse-turned-witness. Across the aisle, her father entered in a navy suit, pristine and polished. He looked at her and smiled, a rehearsed, hollow gesture. Clara didn't flinch. The judge entered. The gallery went still. "Call your first witness," the prosecutor said. Clara stood, took the oath, and faced the jury. "Tell us your name," the attorney prompted. "Clara Gold," she answered, voice unwavering. "My father changed it when he erased my mother." The courtroom seemed to lean in. "He made sure I never found her letters. He made sure no one heard her voice." She held up the VHS tape. "Until now." Her father's jaw tightened. The truth had a stage now. And Clara owned it. The prosecution rolled the tape. The courtroom dimmed. Her mother's voice filled the silence. Soft, frightened, but defiant. The bruises on her arms. The whispered warnings. The plea to Clara, "Don't believe him." Many in the courtroom looked away. Others wept. Clara kept her eyes fixed on the screen, unmoving. Her father sat motionless too, his mask cracking. Behind the tape, layers of careful fabrication unraveled. The jury's faces changed. This wasn't just evidence. It was confession. As the tape ended, the lights rose. Clara exhaled. "Let the record show," her attorney said, "that the witness never stopped speaking. She was silenced." And now her voice echoed louder than ever. The judge looked down solemnly. "We'll recess until morning." Clara turned to the crowd. Her face no longer haunted, just hardened. The next morning the nurse took the stand. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "I was there," she said, "the night Miriam Gold died." She detailed the bribes, the pressure, the guilt that never left. The defense objected. Overruled. Clara watched as the courtroom shifted again, truth rearranging what people believed. "I left her alone," the nurse confessed. "I knew she needed help, and I didn't stay." The silence afterward was heavier than any gavel. Clara's father stared at the floor, no longer performing. When cross-examined, the nurse refused to fold. "I came forward now because her daughter gave me the courage," she said, looking at Clara. "She reminded me that silence is complicity." A ripple passed through the room. Clara blinked back tears. Justice wasn't swift, but it had a heartbeat again. The defense made one final move. Her father asked to testify. Whispers erupted. He took the stand, adjusted his tie, and began with charm. "I loved my wife. I raised Clara." But the performance faltered. Under cross-examination, the truth bled out. "You controlled her medical access? It was for her safety. You intercepted letters. I thought it best." His justifications unraveled with every answer. "Did you watch her die?" Silence. "Mr. Gold, did you?" A pause. Then, "Yes." The courtroom gasped. Not a cry of guilt, just a tired truth. Clara looked away, her heart hammering. He didn't confess out of remorse. He confessed because the facade finally failed. Letting go meant watching someone fall, and knowing they had no more power. Verdict day. Clara stood outside the courtroom doors, her hands cold despite the sun. Inside, the jury returned. She walked in and sat without a word. The person stood. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." The room didn't erupt. It held its breath. Clara closed her eyes. Not in triumph, but in release. Her father didn't look at her as he was led away. No final words. No apology. Just chains. Clara stepped outside, the sun hitting her face for the first time in what felt like years. Reporters shouted her name, but she ignored them. Her story had been told. In court, in tape, in letters, in scars. And now, finally, it didn't belong to him. It belonged to her. And to the silence that followed justice. Clara returned to the childhood home, keys in hand. The door creaked open, but this time it didn't echo with ghosts. Sunlight poured across the wooden floorboards, and the silence no longer felt sharp, it felt earned. She moved through the house room by room, dusting off the memories, not to erase them, but to give them shape. Her mother's old music box still sat on the shelf. She wound it slowly, letting the melody float into the still air. "You never left," she whispered. Clara sat on the floor, surrounded by old photos and letters, a small fire crackling in the hearth. No rage, no screams. Just a quiet understanding. The pain wasn't gone. It had simply settled into something she could carry. Later that week, Clara visited her mother's grave for the first time since the trial. The tombstone was simple. Miriam Gold. Beloved mother. Silence but not forgotten. Clara laid a single white rose at its base. "I kept my promise," she said quietly. "They heard you." The wind rustled the nearby trees, as if whispering back. She knelt, brushing away fallen leaves, and placed the first letter her mother had written on the stone. Not to return it, but to share it. "You weren't invisible," she said. "You mattered. You still do." As Clara stood, a tear fell. But it wasn't a wound opening. It was one closing. Letting go didn't mean she would stop grieving. It meant she no longer had to carry it alone. Back in the city, Clara boxed up the last of her father's things. Legal books. Awards. Portraits. None of them held weight now. As she sealed the last box, she paused by the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't broken. She was altered, etched with survival. Her mother's eyes. Her own strength. She smiled faintly and whispered, "This house is mine now." A knock on the door interrupted the moment. It was the lawyer. "The estate's officially yours," he said, handing her the final papers. Clara signed them without hesitation. "I'm not keeping the name," she added. "Clara Gold. That's who I've always been." And this time, it wasn't a reclamation. It was a rebirth. Clara visited a women's shelter next. She brought the box of her mother's unwritten letters. "She never got to say these things. Maybe someone else needs to hear them," she told the counselor. They sat on a worn couch, flipping through the pages. "You're turning pain into something else," the counselor said. Clara smiled faintly. "It's all I can do." Around her, women whispered. Children laughed in the distance. There was warmth here, imperfect, but alive. Clara sat among them, not as a victim, but as a bridge. Not everything had to burn. Some truths could plant roots instead. As night fell, Clara walked the boardwalk alone. The ocean whispered like a lullaby. Her coat flared in the breeze, and the stars above blinked without pressure. She leaned against the railing, closed her eyes, and breathed. Deep, light, free. Her mother's voice still echoed sometimes, not as warning, but as comfort. Clara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a final keepsake, a photograph of her as a child on her mother's lap. She looked at it for a long moment, then let it slip into the wind. It danced briefly before the sea swallowed it. Not out of abandonment. Out of peace. Some things belonged to the water now. She stayed until the tide pulled all sound away. The next morning, sunlight spilled through Clara's apartment window. A soft knock broke the silence. At the door stood a courier holding a small padded envelope. "For Clara Gold," he said. She signed and closed the door. Inside was an unlabeled flash drive. No sender. No note. Cautiously, she plugged it into her laptop. One video file. She pressed play. Static filled the screen. Then a date. The night her mother died. But this footage was new. Recently recovered. Clara leaned in. The screen flickered, and a second man stepped into frame. Not her father. Someone else. Unknown. Watching. Smiling. And her father looked afraid. "What the hell is this?" she whispered, heart pounding. The story wasn't over. It had just changed again. The figure in the video walked toward the bed where her mother lay. He leaned down, whispered something inaudible. Then he looked directly into the camera. Like he knew someone would see this. Clara's breath hitched. She rewound, froze the frame, zoomed in. A symbol on the man's ring. A crest she didn't recognize. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Who are you?" she whispered. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. A message? "You're asking the wrong questions?" Clara dropped the phone, chills racing down her spine. Her mother hadn't just been silenced. She'd been watched. And so had Clara. Clara raced to her bookshelf, pulling the old legal folders from her father's archive. One had the same crest, embossed faintly on the spine. "It wasn't just him," she murmured. Her hands shook as she flipped through files, court cases, sealed agreements, anonymous trusts. A pattern. A network. A name that appeared again and again. Delacroix Foundation. She whispered it aloud like a curse. Her father wasn't the architect. He was a pawn. Clara stood suddenly, heart hammering. The house was no longer quiet. The past hadn't let go. It had more secrets buried than she imagined. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she typed, "Research. Drawing. Phone calls. Inquiries." The Delacroix Foundation led to empty addresses, broken links, and redacted records. Every answer disappeared just before she reached it. But Clara wasn't afraid anymore. "You wanted silence," she muttered, typing faster. "You're going to get the opposite." Her screen reflected back determination. The grief had morphed into fury, into purpose. She saved everything onto a separate drive, labeled it Echo. The game had changed, and Clara had nothing left to lose. A school bell rang. Somewhere far from Clara's city, a little girl stepped off a bus, clutching a photo of a woman she never met. "Her name was Miriam Gold," the child said to her teacher. "And I think she's my grandma." The teacher smiled politely. "Let's find your seat, sweetheart." But the child didn't move. She turned toward the camera, toward us. "You don't remember me, but I never forgot you." Fade to black. Silence. Then, a heartbeat. One. Wow. A story reborn.